The afternoon was quiet in a kind of way that made time feel softer. Sunlight stretched across the wooden porch, warming the faded boards as dust drifted lazily in the air. Inside the house, a young boy sat near the window, his chin resting on folded arms, watching the street the way children do when they're waiting for something they can't quite name. That's when he noticed the dog. Not running. Not barking. Just sitting at the edge of the porch, as if the spot had been chosen carefully. The dog lowered himself slowly, paws tucked beneath his chest, eyes calm and observant. He didn't look lost. He didn't look hungry. He simply looked certain. As though this porch, this house, this moment, mattered. The boy leaned closer to the glass, his breath fogging the window. His heart fluttered with a mix of curiosity and something warmer, something he didn't yet have words for. When the dog lifted his head, their eyes met. The gaze wasn't intense or demanding. It was gentle. Steady. Almost familiar. Minutes passed. Then more. The dog didn't move. The boy's mother called from the other room, but he barely heard her. All his attention was fixed on the quiet visitor who seemed to be waiting, not for food or attention, but for connection. Slowly, carefully, the boy opened the door just a crack. The dog didn't flinch. He only shifted slightly closer, tail resting still against the porch boards, as if he understood that trust takes time. The boy felt something settle in his chest. A sense of calm. Of being seen. And though no one could explain why the dog kept returning to that same porch, day after day, one thing became clear. His behavior had a meaning no one expected. The afternoons in Maplewood felt slow in the best possible way. Not empty. Just unhurried. Sunlight drifted through the tall oak trees lining the street, landing softly on the front porch of a small blue house at the corner. The wooden boards had faded over the years, worn smooth by seasons of rain and summer heat, but they still held warmth, especially this time of day. Inside that house lived a young boy named Ethan. He was 9 years old. Quiet by nature. The kind of child who listened more than he spoke. Most days after school, Ethan would drop his backpack by the door, pour himself a glass of milk, and sit near the front window. Not because he was bored, but because he liked watching the world move without him. Cars passed slowly. Leaves skittered along the sidewalk. Neighbors waved to one another. It felt safe. Predictable. And lately, comforting. Ethan rested his chin against the glass, fingers tracing invisible lines on the window as his thoughts wandered. Since his father passed away the previous year, the house had grown quieter. Not sad exactly, just still. His mother did her best, gentle smiles, warm dinners, steady routines, but Ethan felt things deeply. More deeply than he could explain. He liked quiet. But sometimes, quiet felt heavy. That was when he noticed something different. At first, he thought it was just a shadow. Then it moved. Ethan leaned closer to the glass, squinting slightly as his eyes adjusted. At the far edge of the porch, right where the sun met the shade, sat a dog. Not pacing. Not sniffing. Just sitting. The dog was medium-sized, golden brown with darker markings along his back. His fur caught the light in a soft glow, each strand visible in the warmth of the afternoon sun. His ears rested naturally, relaxed, and his posture was calm, almost thoughtful. Ethan blinked. The dog didn't look like he was passing through. And he didn't look lost. He looked settled. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The boy held his breath without realizing it. The dog lifted his head slightly. Their eyes met. Not sharply. Not suddenly. It was the kind of eye contact that arrived slowly, like a quiet understanding. Ethan felt a small tightening in his chest. Not fear. Not excitement. Something softer. Something unfamiliar. The dog's gaze was steady, warm, and patient. As if he had all the time in the world. Ethan glanced back toward the hallway, half expecting his mother to call out. But the house remained still. When he looked again, the dog was still there, tail resting on the porch boards, paws tucked neatly beneath him. Minutes passed. The dog didn't move. Ethan shifted slightly, pressing his palm against the glass. The dog tilted his head, just a little. It felt like a question. "Mom?" Ethan called softly, not taking his eyes off the porch. "Yes, sweetheart," came her voice from the kitchen. "There's a dog outside." A pause. Footsteps approached. His mother leaned beside him, wiping her hands on a towel. She peered through the window, brows lifting slightly in surprise. "Well," she said gently, "he's handsome." The dog remained calm, unbothered by the new presence behind the glass. "Do you think he's someone's?" Ethan asked. "Probably," she replied. "He doesn't look scared." Ethan nodded slowly. That felt important. After a moment, his mother smiled and squeezed his shoulder. "He'll move on soon," she said kindly, then returned to the kitchen. But Ethan stayed. He stayed because something told him this wasn't just a passing moment. Slowly, carefully, he reached for the door handle. The soft click echoed louder than he expected. The door opened just a few inches. The dog noticed immediately. But he didn't jump. Didn't bark. Didn't rush forward. He simply shifted his weight and sat closer. That was all. Ethan's breath caught. The space between them felt charged, not with tension, but with attention. The dog's tail gave one slow sweep against the wood. His eyes never left Ethan's face. "Hi," Ethan whispered. The word felt small, but brave. The dog blinked once. Calm. Accepting. Ethan crouched down, resting his hands on his knees. The sun warmed his back, the air smelled faintly of cut grass and summer dust. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt shared. They stayed that way until the sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the porch. Eventually, the dog stood, gave Ethan one last look, and padded quietly down the steps. Ethan watched until he disappeared down the sidewalk. That evening, as the house filled with the familiar sounds of dinner plates and low conversation, Ethan found himself glancing toward the door again and again. He didn't know why. Only that something inside him felt, gently changed. And though he couldn't explain it yet, one thing lingered clearly in his mind. The dog hadn't just wandered there. He had chosen that porch. And somehow, he had chosen Ethan too. The next afternoon, Ethan checked the porch before he even set his backpack down. He didn't know why he expected anything different. Dogs passed through neighborhoods all the time. Moments came and went. Still, he looked. The porch was empty. Ethan felt a small, quiet disappointment settle in his chest. Not sharp. Just a gentle dip, like missing the last note of a song. He turned away, telling himself it had been nothing more than a calm interruption in an ordinary day. He poured his milk. Sat by the window. Watched the street. Minutes drifted by. Then, a familiar shape appeared at the edge of the sidewalk. Ethan froze. The dog moved slowly, unhurried, paws touching the pavement as if he knew exactly where he was going. He didn't sniff the grass. Didn't glance toward the neighboring houses. His attention stayed forward, fixed. On the porch. On Ethan. The boy's heart lifted in a quiet rush. The dog climbed the steps and settled into the same spot as before, half sunlight, half shade. He lowered himself with care, paws folding neatly, tail resting still against the wood. Like he'd never left. Ethan leaned forward, eyes wide, a smile tugging at his lips before he even noticed it. Something warm spread through him, something simple and steady. He came back, he whispered to no one. The dog lifted his head. Their eyes met again. That same calm connection returned, deeper this time. Familiar. Ethan stood slowly, not wanting to startle him. He moved toward the door, careful with each step, the floorboards creaking softly beneath his feet. The dog didn't react. That mattered. Ethan opened the door a little wider than yesterday. Cool air brushed his face, carrying the scent of leaves and sun-warmed wood. He sat down just inside the doorway, leaving space between them. Neither crossed it. They didn't need to. Ethan studied the dog closely now. The soft rise and fall of his chest. The way his ears shifted at distant sounds, but always returned to neutral. Calm. Present. You don't seem lost, Ethan said quietly. The dog's tail moved once. Slow. Gentle. Ethan felt something loosen inside him. Time passed differently when the dog was there. The world outside faded into background noise. The boy found himself talking, just a little. About school. About the tree down the street that lost its leaves too early. About how quiet the house felt sometimes. The dog listened. At least, it felt that way. When Ethan paused, unsure what to say next, the dog shifted closer. Not all the way. Just enough for his presence to be felt more clearly. His shoulder lined up with the porch post. His gaze remained steady. Purposeful. That word floated through Ethan's mind. Later, when his mother called him in for dinner, Ethan hesitated. I think he's waiting for something, Ethan said. His mother stepped beside him, looking out at the porch. She smiled softly. He looks very patient, she said. But it's almost dark. Ethan nodded. I'll bring him some water, he said quickly. Just in case. She considered this, then nodded. All right. But just water. Ethan returned with a small bowl. He placed it carefully near the edge of the porch and stepped back. The dog watched him the entire time. Then, slowly, he leaned forward and drank. Quietly. Gratefully. When he finished, he lifted his head and met Ethan's eyes again. Something passed between them. Not excitement. Not obligation. Recognition. That night, Ethan dreamed of warm afternoons and quiet companionship. He woke with a sense of calm he hadn't felt in a long time. And the next day, the dog came back. Same time. Same spot. Day after day, the pattern continued. Sometimes Ethan spoke. Sometimes they just sat. The dog never scratched at the door. Never whined. Never demanded attention. He stayed as long as the sun lingered, then left just before evening. Always peaceful. Always certain. Ethan started waiting for him. He'd finish his homework faster. Sit by the window earlier. He noticed small things now, the way the dog tilted his head when Ethan laughed softly. The way his tail rested still unless Ethan moved closer. It felt intentional. One afternoon, Ethan asked the question out loud. Why do you keep coming here? The dog didn't answer. But he did something else. He stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked down the street. Not randomly. Not curiously. Specifically. Ethan followed his gaze. There was nothing unusual. Just the sidewalk stretching away, quiet and empty. When Ethan looked back, the dog was watching him again. Steady. Focused. Ethan swallowed. A new thought formed, slowly, carefully. Maybe the dog wasn't waiting for a place. Maybe he was waiting for a person. And as the days passed, that gentle idea grew stronger. Because every time Ethan stepped outside, the dog shifted closer. And every time Ethan felt quiet inside, the dog seemed to know. By the end of the week, Ethan realized something important. This wasn't just a visit anymore. It was a routine. A shared one. And whatever had drawn the dog to that porch in the first place, it wasn't finished yet. By the second week, Ethan no longer wondered if the dog would come. He wondered when. The afternoons had begun to shape themselves around that quiet expectation. Homework finished sooner. Shoes placed neatly by the door. Curtains left slightly open so the light and the view could reach him where he sat. Sometimes Ethan watched from the couch. Sometimes from the floor. Most days, from the window. He liked that place best. From there, he could see the whole porch without being seen himself. The glass felt like a soft boundary, close enough to feel connected, far enough to feel safe. Ethan rested his forehead against the cool pane, breathing slowly as the neighborhood settled into its familiar rhythm. And then, there he was. Always arriving the same way. The dog would appear at the far end of the sidewalk, walking with a calm, steady pace. Not distracted. Not hurried. His path never wavered. As if the route itself lived inside him. Ethan's chest warmed every time. He noticed things now. How the dog slowed slightly as he reached the porch steps. How he paused just for a second before climbing them. How he chose the same place to sit, adjusting his position until it felt exactly right. Like a ritual. Ethan found himself studying the dog the way one studies something important, something meaningful. The rise and fall of his breathing. The way his ears turned at distant sounds but never stayed alert for long. The softness in his eyes. This dog wasn't watching the street. He was watching Ethan. One afternoon, Ethan didn't go outside right away. He stayed behind the glass longer than usual, curious to see what would happen. The dog arrived, settled into place, and waited. Minutes passed. The dog glanced toward the door. Then the window. He didn't move. Ethan felt a gentle pull in his chest. He lifted his hand slowly, and pressed his palm against the glass. The dog noticed immediately. He rose to his feet and stepped closer, just one pace. Close enough that Ethan could see the detail in his fur. The tiny scar near one ear. The flecks of darker gold along his back. Their eyes met through the glass. The moment stretched. Ethan didn't smile. Didn't wave. He just stayed. The dog sat again. Satisfied. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was when Ethan understood something quietly profound. The dog wasn't coming for attention. He was coming for presence. Later that day, Ethan's mother found him sitting by the window again. "You've been there a lot lately," she said gently. Ethan nodded. "He comes every day," he replied. She followed his gaze and smiled. "I see that. Do you think he's lonely?" Ethan asked. His mother thought for a moment. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe he knows where he feels comfortable." That answer stayed with Ethan. Comfort. The word fit. As the days passed, Ethan noticed subtle changes in himself. The quiet in the house didn't feel as heavy anymore. It felt held. Like something steady existed just outside, waiting patiently without asking anything in return. Some afternoons, Ethan talked softly through the open door. Other times, he stayed silent. The dog accepted both. Once, Ethan brought a book to the doorway and read aloud, not loudly, not performatively. Just enough to share the sound of his voice. The dog lay down, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. Listening. Ethan paused mid-sentence. "You don't mind, do you?" The dog's tail tapped once against the wood. That was answer enough. One particularly quiet afternoon, Ethan noticed something different. The dog arrived as usual, but instead of settling right away, he stood near the porch steps. His body angled slightly, not toward the house, but toward the street. He looked back at Ethan. Then back down the sidewalk. Ethan followed his gaze instinctively. The street looked the same as always. No people. No cars. Just sunlight and stillness. When Ethan looked back, the dog was watching him closely now. His posture alert, not tense, attentive. "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked softly. The dog didn't respond. But he stayed standing. Ethan felt a soft flutter of uncertainty, not fear, just curiosity. He stepped closer to the doorway. The dog relaxed. Sat down. The moment passed. But the feeling lingered. That night, Ethan lay in bed thinking about the dog. About the way he watched. The way he seemed to notice changes before they happened. The way his presence felt purposeful, like he wasn't just reacting to the world, but sensing it. Ethan pressed his hand against his chest. He thought about his father. About how he used to sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the street quietly. About how he always said some things didn't need words. Ethan swallowed. The thought arrived gently, but firmly. What if the dog sensed things people couldn't say out loud? The next afternoon, Ethan didn't wait behind the glass. He opened the door early. The dog was already there. He looked up immediately. Ethan sat down on the porch this time, still leaving space, still respecting the quiet. The wood was warm beneath him. The air smelled like summer. The dog shifted closer. Not much. Just enough. Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't know where this connection was leading. Didn't know why it felt so important. But one thing was becoming clearer with each passing day. This bond wasn't forming by accident. It was being built, slowly, deliberately. And whatever the dog was sensing, Ethan was beginning to feel it too. By the third week, the porch no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like a meeting place. Ethan stepped outside more easily now. Not all at once. Not rushing. He would sit near the doorway at first, legs folded beneath him, hands resting loosely in his lap. The dog watched each movement with calm attention, never startled, never unsure. They had learned each other's rhythm. The dog knew when Ethan needed space. Ethan knew when the dog was ready to be closer. Some afternoons, they sat apart, sharing nothing more than the warmth of the sun and the sound of leaves shifting in the breeze. Other days, the dog lay down near Ethan's feet, close enough that their presence overlapped, close enough to feel connected. But never forced. Ethan noticed the dog's intuition most in the smallest moments. If Ethan laughed quietly, the dog's tail moved once. If Ethan grew still, the dog remained perfectly calm. If Ethan's shoulders sagged just slightly, the dog would lift his head and look at him, as if asking a question without words. One afternoon, Ethan gathered the courage to reach out. He didn't touch the dog right away. He rested his hand on the porch boards, palm open. The dog noticed immediately. He leaned forward just enough for his nose to brush Ethan's fingers. Warm. Soft. Real. Ethan's breath caught. The dog inhaled gently, then pulled back, giving Ethan the space to decide what came next. Ethan smiled. He moved his hand slowly, carefully, brushing his fingers through the fur at the dog's neck. It was warm from the sun, thick but smooth, carrying the faint scent of grass and clean air. The dog didn't flinch. He closed his eyes. Ethan felt something shift inside him, something quiet, something deeply comforting. His chest loosened. His breathing slowed. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure who the words were for. From that day on, touch became part of their language. Not constant. Not demanding. Just present. Ethan learned where the dog liked to be scratched. Behind the ear. Along the shoulder. Always gently. The dog responded by staying close, by choosing Ethan's side of the porch instead of the far edge. Trust, building slowly. Ethan's mother watched from inside sometimes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She simply smiled when she saw the way Ethan's posture softened, the way his voice grew steadier when the dog was near. One evening, she sat beside him on the porch. "He seems to care about you," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "I think he knows when I'm sad." She wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Dogs are good at that. But Ethan sensed it was more than that. The dog didn't just notice sadness. He anticipated it. There were days when Ethan felt heavy before he even knew why. On those days, the dog arrived earlier. Sat closer. Stayed longer. His presence seemed to press gently against the ache, like a warm hand on a cold day. One afternoon, Ethan had a difficult day at school. Nothing dramatic. Just a comment from another kid. A reminder of how different things were now. He didn't talk when he got home. He went straight to the porch. The dog was already there. Ethan sat down hard, knees drawn to his chest. He stared at the ground, jaw tight, eyes burning. The dog shifted immediately. He stood, walked over, and lay down beside Ethan, his body aligned with the boy's, shoulder to shoulder. The contact was steady and grounding. Not overwhelming. Ethan leaned into him. He didn't cry loudly. Just quietly. The dog didn't move. He stayed until the moment passed. Later, when Ethan wiped his face and took a shaky breath, the dog lifted his head and met Ethan's eyes. His gaze was gentle. Affirming. "You stayed," Ethan murmured. The dog's tail brushed the porch boards. From that day forward, Ethan understood something important. This bond didn't rely on play or treats or commands. It relied on listening. The dog listened with his eyes. With his posture. With his timing. Ethan listened with his presence. The porch became their place, a quiet corner of the world where nothing needed to be explained. Where silence wasn't empty. It was shared. As summer edged closer, the light grew warmer. The afternoon stretched longer. And with each passing day, the connection between the boy and the dog deepened, unspoken but unmistakable. Still, questions lingered. Ethan didn't know where the dog came from. Didn't know where he went at night. Didn't know why he chose this house, this porch, this boy. And yet, the dog never stayed past sunset. No matter how peaceful the moment. No matter how gently Ethan wished he would. As the sky began to dim, the dog always stood. Always looked down the street. Always laughed. One evening, Ethan asked the question he'd been holding back. "Will you come back tomorrow?" The dog paused at the edge of the porch. He turned. Their eyes met one last time. Then he laughed. Ethan sat there long after, watching the empty sidewalk, feeling the warmth fade from the boards beneath him. A new emotion settled in his chest. Not fear. Anticipation. Because whatever this bond was becoming, it wasn't finished yet. By now, Ethan noticed things most people would miss. It wasn't something he tried to do. It just happened. When the dog arrived each afternoon, Ethan could tell almost instantly what kind of day it was going to be. Not by the weather. Not by the time. But by the dog. Some days, the dog settled right away, lowering himself into his familiar spot with a long, relaxed breath. Those were the easy days. Calm days. Days that felt steady from the start. Other days, the dog paused at the top of the porch steps. Just for a moment. Those days felt different. On those afternoons, the dog's posture was slightly more alert, not tense, not anxious. Just aware. His ears tilted forward before easing back. His eyes moved more slowly, as if he were taking in details others couldn't see. Ethan began to feel it too. A faint tightness in his chest. A sense of waiting. One afternoon, Ethan came home with a folded paper in his backpack. He didn't look at it right away. He didn't want to. The day had been long, and the quiet of the house felt heavier than usual. The dog was already on the porch. He didn't lie down this time. He stood. Ethan hesitated at the doorway. The dog looked directly at him. Not demanding. Not urgent. Just present. Ethan sat down slowly, setting his backpack beside him. He ran his fingers along the edge of the paper inside, feeling its sharp crease. The dog stepped closer. Close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of his body through the summer air. The dog lowered himself beside Ethan, his shoulder resting lightly against the boy's leg. Grounding. Ethan exhaled. It was a hard day, he whispered. The dog's head turned slightly toward him. That was all it took. Ethan pulled the paper out. It was a note from school. Nothing serious. Just a reminder of a presentation coming up. But it stirred something deeper: nerves, memories of standing in front of people, of feeling exposed. The dog stayed still. Ethan folded the paper again and tucked it back into his bag. "I don't like when people look at me," Ethan said softly. "Not like that?" The dog shifted closer. Ethan rested his hand against the dog's side, feeling the slow rhythm of his breathing. The tension eased, not all at once, but enough. That was when Ethan began to understand. The dog wasn't reacting to events. He was responding to Ethan. His mood. His worries. The emotions he carried quietly. Another day, Ethan felt light before he even stepped outside. He'd laughed at school. Played longer than usual. That afternoon, the dog arrived relaxed, tail loose, eyes bright. They sat side by side, sharing the warmth. Ethan smiled without thinking. "You know, don't you?" he said. The dog's tail tapped once. Ethan's mother noticed the change too. "He seems to match you," she said one evening. "Like he's tuned in." Ethan nodded. "I think he feels things." She smiled. "Some dogs do." But Ethan sensed something more specific. There were moments when the dog would lift his head suddenly, eyes focused not on the street, but on Ethan. Those moments often came right before Ethan's thoughts drifted to his father. Right before the ache surfaced. The dog always noticed first. One afternoon, Ethan sat quietly, staring at the porch boards. His thoughts turned heavy. His throat tightened. Before Ethan could move, the dog rose and stepped directly in front of him. He sat, blocking Ethan's view of the ground. His eyes met Ethan's, steady and warm. Present. Ethan blinked. "Okay," he whispered. "I'm here." The dog relaxed. That small interaction stayed with Ethan long after the dog left that evening. The signs were subtle. But they were consistent. The dog arrived earlier on harder days. Stayed closer when Ethan felt unsure. Left gently when the moment had passed. As if his purpose wasn't to stay forever, but to arrive when needed. One afternoon, Ethan decided to test something, not to prove it, but to understand it. He stayed inside longer than usual, pretending to be busy. He watched from the hallway mirror as the dog arrived and settled on the porch. Minutes passed. The dog looked toward the door. Waited. Then, slowly, he stood and paced once. Not restlessly. Thoughtfully. Ethan felt a tug in his chest. He stepped outside. The dog immediately relaxed, sitting back down with a soft huff. Ethan smiled. "You were waiting," he said. The dog leaned into his leg. That was the moment Ethan realized something important. This connection wasn't accidental. It wasn't random kindness. It had meaning. Still gentle. Still unexplained. But growing clearer every day. As the sun dipped lower that afternoon, the dog stood as usual, preparing to leave. But before stepping off the porch, he turned back and looked at Ethan longer than he ever had before. His gaze felt deliberate. Ethan felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with anticipation. Something was coming. Something the dog already knew. And soon, Ethan would understand it too. The change didn't arrive loudly. It came the way meaningful things often do. Quietly. Almost unnoticed at first. It was a Thursday afternoon when Ethan felt it. Nothing particularly difficult had happened that day. School had been ordinary. The walk home uneventful. But as Ethan reached the front steps, a heaviness settled in his chest, familiar, but deeper than usual. The dog was already there. Not sitting. Standing. His body was angled toward the door, ears relaxed but attentive, eyes focused in a way Ethan hadn't seen before. Not urgent, but aware. As if the dog had been waiting not just for Ethan's arrival, but for this moment. Ethan paused. The dog didn't move closer. He waited. Ethan sat down slowly on the porch, knees drawn in. The wood felt cooler than usual beneath his palms. He stared at his shoes, suddenly unsure of what he was feeling. The dog stepped forward, then one smooth, deliberate motion, and sat directly in front of Ethan. Close enough that Ethan had to lift his head to meet his gaze. Their eyes locked. And something shifted. Not outside. Inside. Ethan's thoughts drifted, uninvited, to his father. To the porch in the evenings. To the quiet way his dad used to sit, arms folded, just watching the street. To the space beside him that now felt permanently empty. Ethan swallowed hard. "I miss him," he whispered. The words felt heavy as they left his mouth. The dog didn't flinch. He leaned forward instead, resting his forehead gently against Ethan's knee. The contact was soft. Steady. Grounding. Ethan's breath broke. Tears came, not all at once, but at a slow release. The kind that builds quietly behind the eyes before spilling over. He pressed his hands into the dog's fur, fingers curling instinctively. "I don't know how to talk about it," Ethan said through a shaky breath. "Everyone thinks I'm okay." The dog stayed. His presence felt intentional now, not just comforting, but anchoring. As if he were holding space for something Ethan had been carrying alone. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forehead against the dog's neck. They stayed like that for a long time. No movement. No sound. Just shared stillness. When Ethan finally pulled back, the dog lifted his head and looked at him with that same steady gaze. Not pity. Not concern. Recognition. That was when Ethan understood. The dog wasn't just responding to emotions as they appeared. He was responding to emotions Ethan tried to hide. Later that evening, Ethan's mother found him unusually quiet. "You okay?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded, then hesitated. "I talked about Dad today," he said. Her eyes softened. "I'm glad," she replied. "With who?" Ethan looked toward the porch. "The dog." She followed his gaze and smiled faintly. Sometimes it's easier to talk when someone just listens. That night, Ethan dreamed again. Not of loss, but of sitting on the porch, sunlight warming his back, the dog beside him. His father's presence felt close. Not painful. Comforting. The next afternoon, the dog arrived earlier than ever. Ethan felt it before he saw him. The dog didn't sit in his usual place. He stood near the edge of the porch, looking down the street. His posture was intense, but it was focused. His body angled as if anticipating something. Ethan joined him quietly. "What is it?" he asked. The dog glanced back at Ethan, then toward the street again. Ethan followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then a woman appeared at the far end of the sidewalk. She walked slowly, carrying a bag, her steps careful. As she drew closer, Ethan noticed something familiar. The dog stiffened slightly. Not alarmed. Recognizing. The woman stopped a few houses down, adjusting her grip on the bag. She looked around uncertainly. The dog let out a soft breath. Then he looked at Ethan. And for the first time since the bond began, he didn't stay. He stepped off the porch. Ethan's heart fluttered. The dog walked down the steps, turned once as if to check that Ethan was watching, then continued toward the woman. Ethan stood slowly. A quiet realization began to form. The dog hadn't been waiting for a place. He'd been waiting for a moment. And whatever was about to happen, it was the reason he'd come to that porch in the first place. Ethan stood at the edge of the porch, heart steady but full, watching as the dog moved down the sidewalk. He didn't run. Didn't pull ahead. He walked with the same calm purpose he always carried. The woman noticed him almost immediately. She stopped, lowering her bag slowly, her posture shifting from cautious to surprised. The dog approached her carefully, tail low and relaxed, ears soft. When he reached her, he sat, just as he did on Ethan's porch. Waiting. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh," she whispered. Ethan couldn't hear her words from where he stood, but he could see her face. The way her expression changed from uncertainty to recognition to something deeply emotional. She knelt. The dog rose and stepped closer, pressing his head gently against her shoulder. She wrapped her arms around him, eyes closing as she held him tightly. Not desperately. Not fearfully. Gratefully. Ethan's chest tightened. He felt like he was witnessing something private, something important. After a moment, the woman stood and looked toward the porch. Her eyes met Ethan's, and she hesitated before offering a small, gentle wave. Ethan waved back. She walked over slowly, the dog now beside her. "Hi," she said softly when she reached the porch steps. "Hi," Ethan replied. She glanced down at the dog, brushing her fingers through his fur. "I was hoping I'd find him here." Ethan blinked. "You know him?" She smiled faintly. "Yes. His name is Oliver." The name settled warmly in Ethan's chest. "He belongs to my father," she continued. "Or, he did." Ethan stayed quiet. "My dad passed away a few months ago," she said gently. "Oliver used to sit on his porch with him every afternoon. Same time. Same spot." Ethan's breath caught. She looked around the porch, the faded boards, the angle of the sun, the way the light rested in the same place Oliver always chose. "When I saw this house," she said, "I felt something familiar." Ethan swallowed. "My dad used to say dogs remember feelings," she added. "Not places. Not routines. Feelings." Oliver sat between them, calm and present. "He sensed you," she said to Ethan softly. "You're quiet. You're waiting." Ethan felt his chest fill, slowly, warmly. "He comes when I feel sad," Ethan said. She nodded. "That sounds like him." The pieces fit together gently. Not painfully. Oliver hadn't been lost. He'd been grieving. And in Ethan, he'd found something familiar, something that felt like home. "I was afraid to take him away," the woman said. "But I think he's ready now." Oliver looked up at Ethan. Their eyes met one last time. Ethan knelt and rested his hand against Oliver's chest. "Thank you," he whispered. Oliver leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against Ethan's. Then, slowly, he stood and walked back down the steps. Not hurried. Not reluctant. Just complete. As they walked away together, Ethan felt something settle peacefully inside him. The porch felt quiet again. But it didn't feel empty. Because the bond they formed had done exactly what it was meant to do. It had helped two hearts find their way forward. The porch felt different the next afternoon. Not empty. Just quiet in a new way. Ethan sat where he always had, knees pulled in, hands resting on the warm boards. The sunlight still fell across the porch in the same soft angle. The oak trees still whispered in the breeze. The neighborhood moved gently along, just as it always had. But Oliver didn't come. Ethan expected the familiar shape at the end of the sidewalk. The steady walk. The pause at the steps. It didn't happen. And somehow, that was okay. Ethan took a slow breath and let it out. The ache in his chest was there, but it wasn't sharp. It felt like the kind of ache that comes after something meaningful. The kind that carries gratitude alongside sadness. His mother joined him quietly, sitting beside him without a word. "He found what he needed," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "So did I," he replied. They sat together for a while, sharing the stillness. Ethan noticed how the quiet no longer pressed down on him. It felt open now. Spacious. Like room had been made for something new. That evening, Ethan did something he hadn't done in a long time. He talked about his father. Not just in passing. Not with half words. He told his mother about the porch evenings. About how his dad used to sit and watch the street. About the way Oliver reminded him of that calm presence, the feeling of being quietly understood. His mother listened. Her eyes glistened, but she smiled. "I think your dad would have liked that," she said. Ethan smiled too. In the days that followed, Ethan noticed small changes in himself. He still liked quiet. But he wasn't afraid of it anymore. He carried Oliver's presence with him, not as a loss, but as a lesson. That connection doesn't always last forever. Sometimes it arrives only long enough to help you through something. And that was enough. One afternoon, a week later, Ethan stepped onto the porch and felt the warmth of the boards beneath his feet. He sat down, closed his eyes, and breathed in the familiar scent of summer. For just a moment, he felt it again. That calm. That shared stillness. Not because Oliver was there, but because what Oliver had given him remained. Ethan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. He understood now. Some bonds don't stay. They teach. And when they've done what they came to do, they move on quietly, gently, with love. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Ethan stood and looked down the sidewalk one last time. He whispered, "Thank you." The breeze carried the words away. And the porch, once a place of waiting, became a place of peace.